This is a Ferrari 250 Europa GT Speciale. Pininfarina built the car as a styling car, one-off styling car for January 1955 at the Paris Auto Show. There's a lot of unique features because it was kind of, again, a styling exercise. This is the first time that Ferrari had ever used the term GT, first time it had ever done a fastback. These slats right in here I think are particularly beautiful and interesting. Those were continued on in what became the Tour de France cars that Ferrari made, highly successful. The car was scheduled ultimately to race at Le Mans. The outside filler cap, the removable hood were essential features for a car to qualify to race at Le Mans. But about 3 weeks before the event, the owner broke his ankle. And if you looked at the position of the accelerator and the brake, they're almost behind each other. So there'd be no way with the cast that you could manipulate that. So he didn't do that. But again, that's why it has the open wheel, which was required again for Le Mans. But some features which I find very interesting about the car, and I think a lot of people do, when they look at this C-pillar area, they look at it. I was just talking to a person just moments ago, and he says, I don't want to insult you, but it kind of looks like a Mustang. And I go, well, that's because Ford Motor Company used this car ultimately to help design their Mustang. And so it's unequivocal that essentially 10 years before, maybe I think it looks more like the '67 Mustang. So 12 years before that, this is where that styling came from. And to me, the proportions of the car look much more like a 60s style car than a 50s style car. If you think of its exact contemporary, it would be a 55 Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing, which is a beautiful car. But when you look at those side by side, this one looks, in my mind, quite a bit newer, more advanced in its styling. And that was Pininfarina's goal for that. The car got to the States because it was originally owned by, I think, a Frenchman. A military personnel bought the car, did some things to it while he's over in Europe, but he spent all of his money on painting it red, etc., and he couldn't afford to ship it to the U.S. He was chatting with his superior officer, and the superior officer said, I'll tell you what I'll do. You paint that thing military gray and you put a number on it, we'll send it back as military equipment, shipped it back to Fort Bragg, and I'll sell it to you when you get back there. And in essence, that's what they did. That's how it got to the U.S. The guy bought it back, went to Pennsylvania. This car with the navy blue and tan interior is exactly the original specs because we could find the original paint underneath the dash, and the previous owner who had restored the car simply put new leather over the old leather. So when we took the new leather off, there exactly was the original leather. Now that's not the original leather, but we know exactly what it's like. But anyway, that's how it bridged the gap to America. The previous owner owned it for 30 years, and then and it was preserved very well. Hadn't been driven a lot, and so when we got it, we did a full restoration and brought it back to exact specifications of what it was in January of 1955. To our knowledge, the car never raced. On one hand, it's really nice when cars have race history, so that'd be the good news if it had race history. Most all cars that have race history end up having damage at some point, and this car did not seem to suffer that fate. So no race history, no major damage.